All right, so today I am fired up to be sitting down with my buddy and fellow Caleb.
Hey,
Caleb Botta. What's going on?
It's good.
I try to tell people we try to distinguish this between our last names because Caleb it's not going to work. It's going to be confusing. So you're Botta and I'm Stevens. It's kind of how we do
Bada
it.
bing, bada boom is my name, Caleb Botta.
So for those of you listening, Caleb Botta is a good friend of mine. I've known him ever since I got here to UGA. He's been a huge inspiration to me. He is a pre-med major, or I guess I should say was a pre-med major. You just finished up.
Yeah, biology.
Yeah, finished up undergrad, headed off to MCG at the Athens campus, right here at UGA. So that's exciting. Caleb and I were in the same small group together for the past couple of years, and he's been a big just influence on my life, and I'm grateful to have him on today. So thanks, man, for being a part.
Yeah, thanks. That was nice.
So today we're talking about working with excellence, and I think that's one of the essential components of having a remarkable career. I think it's particularly relevant to our schoolwork. It's kind of hard to get around schoolwork when you're in college, for obvious reasons. And if you want your career to really make an impact and be meaningful and hopefully remarkable, you can't really get around doing schoolwork, and that takes working with excellence. And for 95% of us, me included, we can't just show up on test day, take the test, having never studied, and ace the class.
Me neither.
Unfortunately, I can't do that. That would be super nice, but I'm not one of those people, and I don't think you are either. So you're a pre-med major, was a pre-med major, and I know one of the big things with pre-med is organic chemistry.
Yep.
From what I've heard, it doesn't matter if you're the most driven person in the world, if you spend your life in the library, if you give it all you've got, it's still a very hard class, no matter how hard you work. And that seems to kind of be the hard fact. So when I heard that you aced OChem, I was like, whoa, what is this guy's secret? I mean, I see him in RUF all the time. He goes to swing dancing. And he's in OChem, and he got an A. What's going on? I was like freaking out. I was like, I gotta talk to Caleb and figure out what's his secret. And it's been funny over the past couple of years as you've talked to me about kind of your secrets to success with organic chemistry in particular. I was surprised that your answer was kind of counterintuitive to what most people would tell you. I think what most people would tell you is, well, you gotta spend your whole day in the library. You gotta make organic chemistry your only major commitment. You can't go to this and that and be involved outside of school. And your answer, I thought, was starkly different from what most people would tell you, is to basically kind of spend your life with OChem. So talk about that for a little bit. What was kind of your key to really doing well in the class?
Yeah, I'd love to. I think first thing to say, I was gracious. I felt very blessed to get the grade that I did. I don't think that I had this miracle formula to get a good grade in that class, and I don't feel like I know because of my beginning grades in that class, it wasn't this raw talent thing. I feel very blessed that I ended up doing well. But yeah, I think the big thing I learned from there, from that class in particular, and just all the chemistries, I think most majors have a class like OChem. For the biology pre-med type people, that's the weed out class where you're like, okay, this is when it gets real. And it's not necessarily the content, the content's super hard, but it's that the professors have decided that this is the hard class.
We're just going to make it
right.
hard
So
on
it's
you.
I've heard finance and accounting for business majors. So it's not, I feel like everyone, no matter what you're doing in college, you probably are going to have a class like that where it's this is the really hard one, whatever it is going to be. And I think what the big principle I learned that was kind of amazing to me, looking back, it's counterintuitive, but I think that in order to do your best, sometimes you have to study less. In order to do your best in a class, a lot of times you have to study less. And I think our initial reaction, we get into these really hard classes and we kind of freak out and we're like, all right, I've just got to sell out for this. All right, what am I going to do? And you figure out everything you could possibly do to study. You make flashcards, you read your notes, you read the book before class, you talk to people, you study in groups, you get tutoring. You just kind of make this list of things you could do, and then you just attack it with reckless abandon. Just go for it, go to town. That's what most people do. And I think that has a place, but what I've really learned is when I did that with chemistry and I just sold out for it, and I was in the library and that's all I was doing, I began to almost wither, for lack of a better term, because I was just studying. And what happened was eventually I came to a place where I realized like this, all these other different aspects of my life were just suffering because I was in the library all the time. I hadn't been spending hardly any time with friends. I hadn't seen my family. There's just all these different aspects of my life were kind of going to shambles as I sold out for this organic chemistry class. And then I wasn't getting the grades I needed either. And so I just kind of realized I was in this place like I have to, something has to change. And what happened for me is when I got balanced again, when I started hanging out with friends and going swing dancing, and when I went home, like I remember there was a week I had 4 tests within 2 days. It's only happened to me once in undergrad. And they were all sciences. I had a family birthday party the day before, and I went. Think decisions like that. Wow. I'm convinced that when you have your life in balance, what happens is you are giving up some of that time that you could use to study. And like the most intuitive thing is like, okay, in order to do my best in this class, I need to take all the time I have and put it there and just work. And I think what's amazing is when you take the time and you say, these are what are the things that are important to me, and you make sure you do those, I think what that does is it actually makes your study time more effective. So what happens is when you actually pursue balance and you spend time with family and with friends and with doing the things that are important to you in life, what happens is that then fuels you that when you have that other now slightly smaller amount of time, you are motivated that I'm going to make this really good, and the quality of that study time goes up.
Yeah.
Like something simple, like a way to think about it is if you had a huge test tomorrow and it's like, let's say it's 10 o'clock at night, you have a huge test. There's 2 options. Let's say it's 10 o'clock at night, tomorrow at 8 a.m. you have a huge test that you're really worried about. You have 2 options to learn how to study for it. You can either go to sleep and wake up and try to do your best, or you could stay up the entire night and just try to cram as much information into your brain.
May or may not have done that before myself.
Yeah.
Or tried to.
Of course. And so if what's interesting is at some point there, sleeping is actually going to result in a better grade on the test. I think everyone can kind of see that intuitively. And maybe if you totally haven't looked at the material, you should maybe work for 4 hours and get 4 hours of sleep and take it. But at some point, sleeping will help you do better instead of studying. And I'm convinced that applies to everywhere. Getting 8 hours of sleep at night, spending time with friends, spending time with family, doing the things that are important in life, those things actually help you get better grades.
Sounds like a lot of times we kind of equate the number of hours we spend studying to the quality. In other words, if I study for 6 hours a week or a day compared to 3 hours a day, then I'm going to do better on the test or in the class. And sometimes it's not always how it works out, like you're saying. We get burnt out and we're not recharged by the things that really are important to us.
Yeah, I think that's just blatantly not true. And I think that's what we come into college with. Most of the time that's our mentality, because in high school we were assigned homework and we were to do our homework. And if you did your homework, you were good. And if you wanted to get an A, that was the kid who did all their homework. It's like, man. But in college, you get to decide what you want to do. And so I think it's a blatant, like a huge mistake to think that if I just put in a ton of time, that's how I'm going to do well. Because like a great example of this is I was taking genetics, and for genetics at Georgia at least, the big thing is you want to work as many problems as you can. I didn't know this, but I went in at office hours at the beginning of each semester. I tried to do this with all my hard classes, and I just asked the professor, like, all right, I write up my plan for how I'm going to study. I'm like, all right, this is what I'm planning to do. Do you have any advice? Would you change anything? Would you add something? Would you not do this? And I remember that professor said to me, he's like, hey, just work as many problems as you can. That's the only thing that's important, work as many problems as you can. And then halfway through the class, I had a friend who was struggling, and she was working so hard. She read every page of the book. She recorded the lectures and re-listened to them, which takes an eternity to do that. It takes so long. She was putting in all this time. I was putting in about 30 minutes a day working problems. I was doing significantly better than her in the class, just because our approaches were different. So I think that's the thing to realize is like the amount of time isn't what gets you the grade. It's what you learn. And so the simpler principle of making the decision to keep your priorities straight, stay balanced, spend time with your family, spend time with friends, making that decision first increases the quality of that time so that you learn more. And then also it also puts this pressure on you. Okay, I only have 4 hours now to study. How am I going to do that? And you really take the time to think about what's the best thing to do instead of doing everything I can think of. Right. I think both of those are really key.
Yeah, it reminds me of a story. Last semester, back in the fall, I was taking finance, which for the Terry students in business, it's a tough class. I wouldn't put it up there though, Ken, but it takes a lot of time.
From what I've heard,
it's like speaking a different language in a sense, just because it's a totally new introduction of concepts that you've never seen before pretty much ever in your life, or at least thought critically about and learned about. So it's the first finance test of the year, and it's huge, and everyone's stressed, and it's just like, it's really hyped up. Everyone's just nervous, and so we're all studying and kind of cramming in the SLC. And I realized, like you're saying, I've pretty much done all the problems that he's given us for practice. And I feel like I understand pretty much all of them. And so it was about, I want to say it was about 11 o'clock in the morning, and the test wasn't until like 7 p.m. at night.
Yep.
And I was thinking, you know what? It's been a long week. I've been studying for this test. I am dead tired. And the test is until 7 p.m. tonight. So I was thinking, I could keep working these problems, or you know what? I could just go home and take a nap.
Yeah.
And wake up a few hours before, get a little coffee going, get the energy going, and then just go take the test. And I ended up doing that. And at first, I felt kind of guilty, like, what am I doing? I'm wasting all this time. I could be studying and just putting in the hours and grinding it out and getting ready. But I just turned out the light and went to sleep. Drove home, went to sleep, got up, went back to the campus, took the test, and it worked out. Got an A, So I think it kind of shows you right there that a lot of times we tend to value efficiency over effectiveness instead of the opposite of thinking about how can we do this best, and not just how much time are we spending, how many things are we getting through, that kind of thing.
And I think there's also a temptation to I feel like we want to know that we're okay, and for some of us we say like studying is what's making me okay. For me, the trap that I always fell into is like, I want to do my best, and that's how I define myself. And so what that ends up doing, like an example is, let's pretend like if you were weightlifting, and like let's say you're in the gym and you're lifting a bar and you're trying to do like 10 curls or something like that, and you're going and for studying, the way we think of studying a lot of times is like our workouts, like, all right, I've got to do these 10 sets of 10 for curls or whatever, when in reality the best thing to do if you really just wanted to lift that bar is to go and get like a ham truck or something, or like go get a pulley system, or you can cheat, like go get a tutor. I think a lot of times with our homework we think like, well, I worked all these problems, so I'm a good worker. It's like, or you could have just gone and gotten tutoring, spent maybe like a third of the time, and then use that other 2/3 time to like hang out with friends. So I think that's the thing. You always have to look at what's going. Am I learning? Is this effective? And make that it's effectiveness, not effort.
Right. Yeah. For accounting, in Terry as well, one of the big things that is really key to being successful is working the problems in the back of the book.
Yeah.
And I did that. But what I also did, which was a huge mistake, was I read every single word on every page of every chapter leading up to the first test.
Yep.
So much so that when I was taking notes, it got so bad. I had locked myself in my room. It was one of those things, again, where it's like the first test that you're studying for, and there's just so much hype, and everyone's nervous. I got tendonitis in my elbow, and it hurt to move my elbow for a week after because I had put so much time into reading the notes in the book, and it was like, it didn't even really help me at the end, and I put hours and hours and hours into it, and really it's more about, all right, Caleb, just study the concepts. How do you do the problems? How does this work? How does the income statement work? That kind of thing, and not how many words can you read about it, and basically just regurgitate it on a piece of paper.
I think the big thing with studying that I think is one of the main things I learned throughout my entire college experience is, I think the thing that's a good North Star for you as you figure out how you want to study for a difficult class is to kind of sit down and decide, like, okay, what are the things in life that are important to me? Like, what are my priorities? And like, I think that's something that's exciting about college is it's this first time for a lot of us that we really get to decide, like, who is Caleb Botta? What am I going to be about? What am I going to do? And I think what I've learned with studying is that when you sit down and you figure out, all right, this is what's most important to me, and you write that out and you know that, then what it lets you do is when, like for me, like family and friends, like spending time with friends, like, people think of that, oh, I'm procrastinating, I'm hanging out with my friends. It's like, no, actually this is something that's really important to me. When you have sat down and you figure out this is what Caleb Botta is about, that makes it so much easier to put everything into context. So like I think it's easy for a lot of people when you go in towards a big test, you're like, oh no, there's so much writing on this, and you get really stressed out really fast. And you're like, okay, I'm going to fail. This is terrible. I'm working. I'm tired. I'm going to fail. And for me, what I kind of realize is when I step back and I look at like, okay, what are the things that are really important to me in my life? And like just kind of simply, I think we've all kind of done this on some level, but like my faith, my family, my friends. When you step back and look on it this way, you can ask this question, which is a crazy question. It's, why am I studying? And for me, when you say, why am I studying? It's like, well, I want to go into this school and I, just do whatever that is for you. I think what that does for you is that arms you to come back into this conversation about how you're studying. Like, if you know why you're studying, you can look at the how conversation a lot differently. Because I think for a lot of us, we just think, why am I studying? Because in this phase of my life, this is like the most important thing going on. Because if I don't get into med school, I'm going to die. So, I think people, like, you don't ever say it that way, but that's almost like where we come from a lot of times is like, if I don't pass this accounting test, the world ends. And so we get really stressed out and we just dive into it. I think when you take a step back and you look at your priorities and you're like, okay, why am I studying in the first place? That equips you to walk into your studies and look, okay, what's the best way to do this? And to realize, if I'm not successful, it's going to be okay. Or, maybe for you, like if studying really is your most important thing, that's an entire conversation. But if that is your most important thing, then you probably should burn the candle at both ends and just completely sell out for it. But if you realize that there's other, like for me, like my faith and like I said, faith, family, and friends for me are three much bigger things than my work. But I think my work's an important part of those things. And so what happened to me is it kind of created this sandbox of like, when it's time to work, I'm going to work really hard. But then when it's time to spend time with friends or with family or like read my Bible, things like that, I'm going to do that too. And that's also important to me.
Almost comes down to stewardship with what you've been given. And all these different callings in our lives that we have, and making sure that, like you were saying, those values and those things that are important are really what kind of frames the whole conversation about work and why it really matters in the first place.
Yeah. And then what that lets you do is like you can look at the conversation. The classic thing that happens is, it's time to study, and then someone's like, hey, you want to go throw a Frisbee? You can sit down there and look at that decision and really make a good decision based off that. And when you have sat down and this is why I'm studying, this is how I'm going to study, this is how much I'm going to study, it kind of frees you to go do that. And you're like, I don't know if that makes sense. But
no, it does, absolutely.
Like it frees you to go play Frisbee and not be guilty about it. And frees you to be involved in, like, two things I was involved with is I volunteered at this place called Mercy Health Center in Athens, and I was involved at RUF, and like those were very important parts of my life. And so even though like I might have the test the next day, I'm still going to go to RUF because I decided that in advance, and when I sat down to plan how I was going to study for that test, that's what I would do.
That's good. I was listening to Mark Miller talk the other day. He's the VP of Leadership Development for Chick-fil-A, and he was saying how a lot of times we tend to be we tend to kind of bend to one side, whether it's results or relationships. Some of us can really dive into relationships and be present in those, and then the results are kind of secondary. And oftentimes, I know I'm this way, we tend to value results a little bit more than relationships, and we forget sometimes that people are way more important than just tasks that we have to do with our work. And really, a lot of times it's hard to quantify a relationship or friendship. How do I quantify the success in that?
Yeah.
How well that's going, or but I can see, I'm accomplishing this, I'm getting this out of the way with whatever I'm doing with school or extracurricular activities, and we tend to kind of bend one way or the other, but really trying to keep that tension, that healthy tension of results and relationships as we steward both of those things.
Yeah, that's good.
Cool. Well, you wrote a blog a while back, and give us just some like practical tips for like when you're in the trenches and you're in class and you're at the library studying. What are some practical things that you think have helped you be successful as a pre-med student in undergrad?
Yeah. So that website is premedthoughtsfromasenior.weebly.com. You probably won't find it on Google because it's a really small site that 10 people have visited, and it's .weebly.com because it's free. But but
we'll put a link to it in the show notes so everyone can get it.
Yeah. So some of I think the biggest thing, honestly, like, and this is practical. It's so simple that it's like frustrating to hear this as advice. But I think it's like flashcards. Like the concept of a flashcard is not difficult, but it can be really helpful to help you do well on a test. So it's kind of like that. I think the idea of deciding how you're going to study before you study is huge. And most people don't do that. But I'm a huge fan of what I do is the week or two before, like probably about 2 weeks before the average test for like a hard class, I'll sit down and I'll write out what I'm going to do before that test. And then I look at those 2 weeks and I write out Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and I write when I'm going to do those things. Mm-hmm. And that is so helpful on a lot of different levels. For one, when the guy comes and wants to play Frisbee, you can look at that schedule, know what you're going to do that day, know if you have time to do it, know if you can switch it to the next day, whatever you need to do, and make a good decision. You don't just have to be like, nope, I'm studying for a test, I can't do anything. And then the next thing you can do that lets you do is after you take that test, what's crazy is you get a grade back. And it sounds silly, but you get this instantaneous feedback on how well you've been doing. And like, especially like some internships I've been in now, I haven't never realized how awesome that is about being a student. You get all this feedback. And lots of jobs, you don't get hardly any feedback. You just kind of keep trying to do well. But you get this number that says, okay, this was my plan. You can look at it and you can write a number at the top, 78. Okay. So I did some good things here. There's some things I can improve. And then the next time you get 2 weeks before a test, you write out what you want to do. And you can compare it to that list. And you can like make improvements on it. And I think everyone kind of does this in their mind, but I'm just a really big fan of writing it out and being intentional about it and then getting advice. You can take that plan and you can go to your professor's office hours and be like, hey, what do you think? And then like your genetics professor, someone will be like, nope, you just need to work problems. Don't do any of that other stuff. You were going to read the chapter. You were going to record the notes, all that. Don't do it. It's a waste of time. Work problems. And I think that's huge. You can take it to upperclassmen who've done well. And I think I'm just a huge fan of being intentional of deciding how you're going to study and when you're going to do it. And just decide those things instead of just being like, I have a test in 3 days. My entire life is studying.
Sounds like me, but thankfully we have Caleb Botta to give us
No. Well, and here's the thing, too. Okay, so like everyone has the class where they don't think about it until 2 days before the test and study for it. Sure. So like Religion 1001, something like that. I'm not saying don't do that. I think that's a completely legit strategy is to not think about a class until the day before and then try. I think that's completely fine. It's college. You're going to do that. But write it down and decide you're going to do that at the beginning of the semester. Don't just have other things going on and then accidentally arrive to like, no, this is what's going to happen. And then you can even know when you're planning, and when this really becomes clutch, is as you keep doing this, if you're intentional about how you study, you will over time, every test you take, every class you get more and more feedback about what's working well for you, and you can keep improving so that then at like your senior year, your junior year, you can have improved to the point where you know exactly what you need to do to get the grade. And then what happens is if you have a situation where you have 4 tests in the same week, you can write out all those plans, overlap them, figure out how the time's going to balance, make it work, and still show up to things that are important to you, like your mom's birthday party or something like that. Whereas, at the beginning of your college career, you don't know what you need to do, so you probably need to keep studying. And so it's just just being intentional about how you study, I think is huge.
That's good stuff, man. Any final thoughts as we wrap up today just on, man, how do you stay balanced? And I remember one time we were in Snelling a while back, and you were telling me, you're like, yeah, I used to try to do my best. Now I just try to do my balanced best.
Yeah.
And honestly, I'm okay with whatever that ends up being.
Yeah. I think it kind of comes back to like, for me, that was something that was kind of passed. I wrestled in high school and it's kind of just passed on to me that like part of being a man, this kind of sounds silly when you just say it like this, but part of being a man is doing your best, like doing great work. That's part of being a man. I think that probably is part of our American culture. But what I've kind of learned that I need to do is that when I look at what's important in my life, I've got different priorities, like my relationship with God, with my family, with my friends, just on down the line. What I've realized is like those things are important because they're important. And so if I completely sell out and ignore my family and my friends and my faith, and I just study for this test, I might get an A. What we've talked about earlier so far in this conversation is you really probably will get a worse grade if you do this. But even if you do just decide to sell out, you might get that. But you'll lose out on those other priorities in your life. At the end of the day, that report card is not going to satisfy you. Mm-hmm. It's not going to, you'll get that A and OChem, but then you're like, I don't have any friends. And like life, it's not a good trade. Mm-hmm. And so what I've kind of realized, I've come to the place where if you look at your priorities and you have them in front of you and you're like, okay, this is where studying is. I'm going to do excellent work. This is how much time I'm going to do there. And then when you're in that time frame, you work your tail off and you do excellent work and you really try to do well. And then once that's over, you're done. And then you can keep the rest of your life balanced that way. And it just makes a huge difference because if I maintain a good relationship with my family and with my friends and all those other parts of my life are healthy and I don't do well in school, that just means that means I'm in the wrong degree program, or this wasn't meant for me and I need to find something else. That's all that means. And that's not this big loss. But if you sell out for school and you miss out on a year or two of your relationship with your parents, when you're later in life, you're going to look back when they're not here anymore and you'll be like, wow, I could have known my mom better, or I could have been there for my little sister when she was going through that time. And I just think that, the regrets, like, I think it's important to keep everything in perspective. So that's the goal I have for myself, is to do my balanced best in each class. How can I steward this block of time that I have and do my best in it?
Man, that's good stuff. Well, thanks so much, Botta, for being on. Really appreciate your time.
Yes, sir. Thank you.